Have you ever felt so exhausted that you just wanted your mind to be quiet for a little while? Not because you're lazy, not because you're weak, but because you've been thinking too much for too long. Thinking about things that haven't happened yet. Thinking about conversations that already ended yesterday. Thinking about the future, about money, about relationships, about whether you're falling behind. And the more you think, the more trapped you feel. That's the cruelest thing about overthinking. It doesn't scream in your face, it only whispers, but it slowly wears down your peace, little by little. And the thing is, most of what drains you every day isn't life itself. It's your uncontrolled thoughts about life. The Stoics understood that very clearly. They didn't try to think less in some naive way. They learned how to put their thoughts in the right place. They knew when to analyze and when to stop, when to face something and when to let it go. In this video, I'm going to share some powerful Stoic rules to stop overthinking, regain clarity, regain calm, and most importantly, regain control of your own mind. Watch until the end, because the last rule could completely change the way you deal with anxiety every single day. Overthinking doesn't always look like overthinking. Sometimes it disguises itself as, I'm just being careful. Sometimes it pretends to be, I'm preparing for the worst. Sometimes it even makes you believe that endlessly thinking is a form of responsibility. But it's not. There's a very thin line between thinking to solve a problem and thinking until you destroy yourself. The Stoics were not against thinking. They were against chaos in thinking. And the first rule is something you need to understand right now. Rule 1. Distinguish between what you can control and what you can't. Honestly, this is very hard, because sometimes even you can't clearly tell what you actually control and what you don't. The line is not always obvious, and because it isn't obvious, that's exactly what creates overthinking. This is almost the foundation stone of Stoic philosophy. Epictetus said, "Some things are up to us, and some are not up to us." Just one sentence. But if you truly understand it, it can save you from hundreds of hours of useless worry. Here's the problem. Most overthinking shows up when you try to control things that were never yours to control. You worry about what other people think of you. You worry about the outcome of an interview. You worry about whether the person you love is changing. You worry about the future of the economy. You worry about whether you'll succeed at the right time. But stop for a few seconds and ask yourself, out of all those things, how many are actually in your hands? The answer usually makes people uncomfortable because it's very little. You can't control other people's reactions. You can't control the past. You can't control every event that happens. You can't control whether someone misunderstands you or leaves you. So what can you control? Your attitude, your actions, your preparation, the way you respond when things don't go your way. And that's the part people who overthink often forget. It's very easy to forget. Being able to answer the question, what can you actually control, is, honestly, not easy for anyone sometimes. It all feels vague, blurry, hard to pin down. They spend mental energy on what's outside their reach, and then have nothing left for what can actually be changed. You can see this clearly in modern life. For example, you post a project, a video, a business idea, or simply share your opinion on social media. Then you start obsessing. Will people like it? Will they criticize it? Will they judge me? That's the familiar spiral. But in Stoicism, the right question is not, how do I make everyone approve of me? The right question is, have I done my part? Did you do the research carefully? Did you try to be honest? Did you express what you truly believe is right? If yes, then the rest is no longer your job. This doesn't just help you worry less, it makes you stronger. Because from that point on, you stop living like a puppet controlled by external things. Whenever your mind starts spinning, try a very practical exercise. Take out a piece of paper. Divide it into 2 columns. On one side, write, what I can control. On the other side, write, what I can't control. Then write down everything you're worried about in the correct column. It sounds so simple, it almost feels stupid. But trust me, it's incredibly effective. Because overthinking grows in vagueness. When everything feels blurry, your mind exaggerates all of it. But when you name things correctly, they lose some of their power. You do not need to control your whole life. You only need to stay loyal to the part that belongs to you. And sometimes, that is more than enough. But there's one more thing. Even when you know you can't control something, your mind can still keep coming back to it again and again. So what do you do then? The second rule goes straight to the root of that. Don't believe every thought that appears in your mind. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." A lot of people read that and think it's just a nice quote. It's not. It's far more practical than you think. One of the reasons you overthink is because you treat every thought as if it were the truth. But sometimes it's just a thought that popped into your mind, showed up out of nowhere, grabbed your attention and made you anxious, made you uneasy. You think, "I'm going to fail," and immediately you believe it. But in reality, sometimes the outcome is completely different, even the total opposite of the negative thoughts you once had beforehand. One piece of advice I want to give you is this. Learn how to wait for things. Everything takes time. Flowers bloom only in their season. Fruit takes enough time to grow. An ordinary woman needs 18 months to give birth after becoming pregnant. Everything takes time. Everything has to unfold naturally, not by force. You think, "That person must be getting tired of me," and you believe it. You think, "If I mess this up, everything will fall apart." And again, you believe it. But thoughts are not always the truth. A thought is just a suggestion from the mind, a hypothesis, noise, a reflex. The problem is, people who overthink rarely stop and question their own thoughts. They hear them and then obey them. The Stoics were different. They observed a thought before giving it authority. They asked themselves, "Is this true? Or is this just fear talking? Do I have clear evidence? Or am I just making assumptions?" This is an incredibly important skill in modern life, especially when we live in the middle of non-stop stimulation. A message gets seen but not answered, and you imagine an entire story. An email hasn't gotten a reply, and you think you're being looked down on. Your boss talks a little colder than usual one time, and suddenly you start imagining being replaced. The mind is very good at making movies, very good at writing pessimistic scripts, but not every script it writes is true. In fact, a huge amount of human suffering comes not from the event itself, but from the story people tell themselves about the event. So, how do you apply this? When a thought makes you anxious, don't instantly step into it. Take one step back and say, "This is a thought, not a fact. This is a feeling, not a command. This is fear trying to protect me, but that does not mean it's right." It sounds small, but this is the difference between someone who leads their mind and someone who gets dragged around by it. I really like one simple practice. Change the sentence, "I'm going to fail," into, "I'm having the thought that I'm going to fail." Just a few extra words, but they create distance. And that distance is where clarity appears. You are no longer fully drowning in the fear. You see it, you recognize it, you notice it arrive, and you also notice that it can leave. How many times have you lost sleep worrying about something, only to realize a few days later that it wasn't nearly as serious as you thought? What percentage of the fears in your head actually comes true? That's what you have to remember. The mind doesn't just think. It exaggerates. It dramatizes. It scares itself. The Stoics did not try to erase all thought. They learned not to kneel before every thought. That is a huge difference. But even when you start seeing which thoughts are useless, one question still remains. If you stop drowning in your own head, what should you do instead? The Stoic answer is very short and very powerful. Place thinking with small action. This is where a lot of people get stuck the most. They think that in order to stop overthinking, they first need to feel clear. They need to feel calm. They need to stop being afraid, and only then can they act. But real life is usually the opposite. You do not act after the confusion is gone. A lot of the time, the confusion starts to fade after you begin to act. Seneca said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." We suffer more in imagination than in reality. And overthinking is exactly the most fertile ground for that negative imagination to grow. You're worried about an upcoming presentation. Open the file and write the first slide. You're worried about your health. Get up and walk for a million minutes. Book a checkup. Drink water. Go to bed earlier. You're worried about your financial future. Sit down and write out your income, your expenses, your debt, your savings. Real numbers are always less scary than a vague cloud in your head. You're worried that a relationship is falling apart. Send a clear message. Have a real conversation. Ask what needs to be asked. Because the truth is this: a chaotic mind loves delay. It loves keeping you there, endlessly analyzing, because that makes you feel like you're dealing with the problem, when in reality, nothing is being solved. Small action cuts that loop, not because it solves everything immediately, but because it brings you back to reality. Overthinking lives in an imaginary future. Action happens in the real present, and the present is always the only place where you have power. Here's a very effective exercise. When you catch yourself overthinking, don't ask, "How do I stop thinking?" Ask, "What is the smallest action I can take in the next 5 minutes?" Just 5 minutes. Send the email. Wash the dishes. Open the document. Write 3 lines. Clean the desk. Get out of bed. Make the call you need to make. Small, but real. That's how you pull yourself out of the fog. Some days you do not need a massive breakthrough. You just need one concrete action to prove to yourself that you are still capable of moving forward. And I think this is one of the most beautiful things about the Stoic spirit. It does not ask you to become a perfect person, completely calm, never anxious, never worried. No, it only reminds you that in every situation you can still choose the next right action. Just one step, then one more. But there's another reason so many people can't escape overthinking. They keep thinking everything has to be mot tram fen tram clear before they can feel at peace. And that is exactly the next trap: uncertainty instead of trying to eliminate it. This is a hard truth to swallow. You cannot think enough to guarantee that life will never hurt you. You cannot analyze deeply enough to make everything always go according to plan. You cannot prepare so thoroughly that all uncertainty disappears. But people who overthink still try to do exactly that. They want absolute certainty, certain that the other person will not leave, certain that this decision is mot tram fun tram right, certain that they will not regret it, certain that the future will be safe. And when they cannot get that certainty, they keep thinking, keep worrying, keep spinning in circles. But the Stoics understood one basic thing: uncertainty is not a flaw in the system, it is the nature of life. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present." Read that carefully. It is powerful. He does not say the future will be easy. He does not say everything will work out the way you want. He says that if the future comes with difficulty, you will still meet it with the same reason and character you are training today. That is the Stoic kind of faith. Not faith that the future will be perfect, but faith that you will be strong enough to face the future when it arrives. That is a huge difference. A lot of overthinking actually comes from not trusting your own ability to endure. You are not just afraid that something bad will happen. You are afraid that if it does happen, you will fall apart. But look back at your life. How many things have you already made it through that you once thought you could not survive? How many times have you gotten back up after seasons when you felt like there was nothing left to hold on to? You are stronger than your panicked mind keeps telling you. So how do you apply this in real life? When you are facing a decision and cannot know every possible outcome in advance, stop asking, "How can I be sure this is the perfect choice?" Ask instead, "With what I know today, what is the kindest, most reasonable, and most courageous choice I can make?" Then choose. And accept that nobody gets through life without risk. To live is to walk through some degree of fog. To love someone is to accept the possibility of being hurt. To pursue something meaningful is to accept the possibility of failure. To grow up is to accept that not every question has an immediate answer. You do not need certainty to live well. You need courage to keep living while things are still uncertain. That is what freedom really is. And now we come to the final rule. In my opinion, this is the deepest one, because it does not just help you think less. It changes the way you look at the entire amount of time you have in this life. Remember that your time is limited. This is the part many people avoid, because it forces us to face something uncomfortable. You do not have unlimited time to worry. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." It sounds a little cold, but it is very real. In the Stoic spirit, remembering death is not meant to make you pessimistic. It is meant to wake you up, to stop wasting your life on meaningless loops, to see that so many of the things we are worried about today are not worth trading away our peace for. Just think about it. How many hours of your life have been swallowed by scenarios that never even happened? How many mornings could have been fully lived, but instead began with anxiety? How many evenings could have been restful, but instead were spent torturing yourself with assumptions? If time is your most valuable asset, then overthinking is one of the quietest thieves. It does not take your money. It takes your presence. It takes your ability to feel life. It takes the joy out of very small things. It even takes away your strength to act. The Stoics remind us, life is short, shorter than you think. That does not mean you need to live in a rush. It means living with awareness. When you start overthinking, ask yourself, is this worth my life's time? 5 years from now, will this still matter this much? If today were truly a limited day, would I want to stay stuck in this loop? Questions like these can pull you back to what is real, what matters, what is necessary. Sometimes, you do not need one more trick for managing your thoughts. You need a direct touch of the truth that your life is passing by. And when you realize that, something very strange begins to change. You argue less. You try less to please everyone. You obsess less over being perfect. You drag out old familiar fears less. You start wanting to live more honestly. Say what needs to be said. Do what needs to be done. Love the people worth loving. Leave what keeps draining you. And protect your peace like something that can no longer be traded away carelessly. That is when overthinking loses part of its greatest power, because you no longer see it as just who I am. You see it as a habit that is stealing your life from you, and you decide you are not going to allow that anymore. So, what are the 5 Stoic rules for stopping overthinking? First, clearly distinguish what you can control and what you cannot control. Do not waste your life on things outside your reach. Second, do not believe every thought that appears in your mind. Thoughts are not always the truth. Third, replace thinking with small action. One real step in life is always stronger than 10 loops in your head. Fourth, accept uncertainty. You do not need to know the whole future in order to live rightly in the present. Fifth, remember that your time is limited. Do not use a finite life to feed endless fears. And maybe this is the most important thing I want to leave with you today. The goal is not to become someone who never worries. That is not realistic. You are human. You will still have restless nights, mornings when you wake up with a heavy chest, moments when your mind spins because too many things are hitting at once. But Stoicism gives you something more valuable than immediate comfort. It gives you posture, a steadier way to live in the middle of chaos, a way to stand still inside your own mind instead of being dragged around by it. Overthinking does not disappear just because you watched one video, but it can start to weaken from the moment you realize that you do not have to obey it anymore. Maybe today you cannot completely silence the noise in your head, but maybe you can believe it a little less. Maybe you can fear it a little less. Maybe you can choose one small action, just one very small action, but enough to bring yourself back to real life. And sometimes, Big change does not begin with a loud decision. It begins with a very quiet moment when you say to yourself, "I'm not going to keep living like this anymore." If you've made it this far, I think maybe some part of this video has touched exactly what you've been going through. Maybe you do not need more information. Maybe what you need is simply to be reminded that you do not have to believe every thought you have, and you do not have to live your whole life inside that mental overload. If this video helped you slow down, get clearer, and feel a little lighter, even just a little, hit like and subscribe to the channel. Because here, we are not chasing short-term motivation. We are learning how to build a stronger inner world, one video at a time. And now I want to ask you one thing. Out of the 9 rules today, which one do you need most right now? Is it letting go of what is outside your control? Is it stopping yourself from believing every thought? Or is it starting to act, even if it is just one small step? Leave it in the comments. I'd really love to read it. Until next time, remember, your mind is a very powerful tool, but it should not become your prison. And this life is truly too short to keep living inside things that never even happened.